It's Ash from Super Videos, back to talk about Season 10 of The Walking Dead. This is going to be my sneak peek breakdown for 3 new scenes from the upcoming episode of The Walking Dead, Season 10, Episode 14, which is called Look at the Flowers. The first one we're going to look at is from the opening minutes, and there's 2 other sneak peeks that we're going to take a look at and break down. So the first sneak peek, which is the opening minutes, is actually something that I predicted. There's actually 2 things I predicted about this upcoming episode that's in the opening minutes itself. The first thing I predicted was that we're probably going to get a flashback where they're going to show us when Carol went to Negan and freed him. And the other thing I predicted was that Negan's deal with Carol was that Negan would kill Alpha, and in return, Carol would vouch for Negan and to have him reintegrate into the community and not be seen as the evil Negan anymore. But we're going to go through all of that. So first we have this shot of Negan looking outside from his jail cell. Then someone comes down there and then Negan whispers shit. And you got to remember, this is right after he saved Lydia, where he accidentally killed one of the highwaymen. So at this point, I think he's just thinking that his hours are numbered basically and that he's gonna be killed any moment now. And we actually do get that reveal in a little bit. But then we actually have Carol coming into the jail cell talking to Negan. Now this is a pretty awesome scene because it's the first time Negan and Carol have had a scene together. So it's awesome because of that alone. But then we have Negan saying, well, as I live and breathe, and Carol looks at him and then he says, I thought you'd be Gaby, coming down to give me my last rites. So this goes back to what I said. Negan thought that Gabriel had come in to read him his final rites before they execute him. But that's obviously not what happened. And then Carol asks, you want forgiveness? To which Negan replies, I done what I've done, ain't getting on my knees about it. So we all know Negan is not the type of person that would ask for forgiveness and kneel. He did kneel in front of Alpha, but he had a bigger plan, which we obviously know about at this point. But then Carol asks, so what do you want? To which Negan gives a pretty interesting response. He says, T-bone, beer, maybe a scoop of Rocky Road. So he's just listing the things that he really wants to drink or eat before he's executed and leaves this earth. And then he asks Carol, matters to you what I want? To which Carol replies, what if you didn't have to die? And then that's what gets Negan intrigued a little bit. He walks up to her and says, didn't know you had a say. Only the council decides my fate. So he's really trying to understand where Carol is coming from because she has no say in what happens to Negan. So what is she really looking for? What is she after? And then Carol says, I'm not here for the council. And Negan says, I'm getting that. And then she says, what I don't get is coming down here and dealing with me when, seems to me, you ought to be lining up your skin queen in your crosshairs, referring to Alpha. And then Carol says, what do you think this is? So Negan is pretty much saying, you shouldn't be here talking to me. You should be dealing with the skin freak that is responsible for killing your child. And then Carol says, so what do you think this is? So we're beginning to know Carol's motives and what she's really after. And then Negan says, damn. And then she says, so you in or out? So do you want to help me or not? And then Negan says, word has it you are a certified badass. I cracked a smile after I heard that. This was awesome. We know Carol was a badass. She's still a badass, but not as much as she used to be. But the fact that Negan brought that up is very, very cool and awesome. And then he says, but you missed your shot. What happens if I muff it too? Could make things a whole lot worse for every man, woman, and child behind these walls. So Negan is pretty much saying, what if I'm unsuccessful as well? What if I fail in my attempt to kill Alpha, just like you were when you took a shot at her? And then he says, and despite what people may think of me, I am absolutely not down with that. So he's not down with innocent survivors dying. That is a little bit of a contradiction because he was there when they attacked Hilltop, during which case men, women, and children, well, not children, but men and women died. But that might have been a small cost for a bigger reward, which is taking Alpha's head. Now, that being said, that connects to what Carol responds with, because she says, I need this done. and it'll help every man, woman, and child here. So Carol is pretty much saying, I'm not down with that either, but that's just a small cost for a bigger reward. I think that's pretty much what she's saying. Does that make her a bad person? That's debatable. But Negan replies, and what do I get out of it? So what's in this for me, basically? And then Carol says, you've been eating whatever shit we throw your way, hoping that one day they will all forget. They won't. Not unless you do something to make them forget. So again, this is leading up to Carol's request or proposal to have Negan help her. To which case, in return, Carol is going to vouch for Negan, make everyone forget about what Negan did. And then she says, so you bring me Alpha's head, and that's what people will remember you for. So that pretty much hits the nail in the head. That's what Carol is after. Negan can bring Alpha's head to her, which he did at the end of episode 12. And then she says, I'll make sure of it. So this just shows you that this is a two-way deal. Negan brings Alpha's head to Carol, and Carol makes sure that Negan is remembered for that. Now, this does connect to what we see in the trailer, where we have Negan saying, I did my part, now you need to do yours, to which Carol replies, I'm not going back, and she just leaves, leading us to think that maybe Carol is not holding her end of the bargain, which is pretty interesting. But then Negan asks, I have your word, to which she says, if you do it fast. So maybe that's what Carol is using as an excuse not to actually help or return Negan's favor, because he didn't do it as fast as she wanted him to do it. And then the scene ends. The new scene that starts is us picking up exactly where we left off at the end of 10-12, with Negan delivering Alpha's head to Carol, and now here, Carol is putting Alpha's head on a pike. This goes back to how Alpha decapitated like 10 people, put their heads on pikes to mark the border. The same thing, leaving her head on a pike. Now, this is not the same exact border, it's a different one. In the other border, there were no trees and it was near a slanted hill, which it doesn't seem what this is. But it's a pretty awesome shot to end the sneak peek or the opening minutes with Carol putting Alpha's head on a pike. And that's pretty much the end of the sneak peek, a pretty awesome one. I'm sure Negan is going to be around. Now, I don't know whether we're going to see the opening credits at this point or whether there's a little bit more to it than that. But this was a pretty awesome opening minute. I hope you enjoyed that sneak peek. It may have been a little longer of a sneak peek breakdown than I usually do for one sneak peek, but there was a lot in there that I wanted to talk about. But the second sneak peek is like a hallucination. Carol is walking around. She has Lydia's stick. I think this is right after she finds Lydia's stick on the ground. But she hears some whispers calling her name, Carol. And then she walks around a little bit more. There's a bit more whispers around saying Carol. And then we see Alpha in the background. This time she actually says Carol. So Carol turns around and sees Alpha looking at her. And then she says, I'm always watching. So obviously this didn't happen. It's a hallucination. I mean, if Alpha was really there, one, we would have already seen it. And two, something would have happened from it, but it didn't. So this is obviously a hallucination. Now, this was actually the one sneak peek that they released on Talking Dead. Now, the third sneak peek is a scene between King Ezekiel and Jerry. Now, this is something else that I also predicted, which was that Jerry would tag along with Eugene in order to go with him to see if there's a possibility of them healing his cancer. Because Eugene would probably at this point tell them that Stephanie, the person he was talking to on the radio, comes from this big community and they may have some pretty sophisticated equipment, supplies, medical supplies, that they could use to treat Ezekiel's cancer. We actually get a reveal about that here, but we have this scene. It seems like Ezekiel is just about ready to leave, most likely with Yumiko and Eugene based on what we see in the trailer, but we have Jerry and Ezekiel here. Jerry asks, are you really going? And then Ezekiel answers, yeah. And then Jerry says, I think that's a good idea. And he says, because I'm sick. So he's just saying I'm leaving because I'm sick. There's two parts to this. One, if anything is to go wrong, he's sick, so he's volunteering himself to take that risk. And two, there might be a reward at the end with him possibly being able to treat his cancer. And then Jerry says, because I'm gonna miss you. And then he says, you can't stop a man willing to be foolish, right? This is referring to Eugene, and this is what was in the trailer, because Eugene says, after everything we've lost, I'm willing to be the fool here. How he is seen as a fool maybe to some people, thinking that there's a bigger community out there and that it's worth taking the risk to go there and meet them. And then Ezekiel laughs, and then he says, or a fool willing to believe, there's a typo in the caption, but willing to believe in future friends. So he's saying that we may have ourselves some future friends. Jerry asks, is that all it is? To which Ezekiel replies, it's enough for now. And then King Ezekiel says, the kingdom needs you. Make sure our legacy lives on. Jerry says, you got it. And then he goes to say boss, but he stops himself and says Ezekiel. And that's when they have this kind of emotional scene and they hug each other. And that's pretty much the end of the third sneak peek. But these are pretty cool sneak peeks. I enjoyed the one with Negan and Carol a lot more than the other two. And it was a little bit longer than the other two as well. But with that said, let me know your thoughts and opinions about these 3 sneak peeks for the upcoming episode. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.